All right, I think we can get started. All right, welcome everyone. Hi everyone. You're on to the probably the best presentation of IT, right? Everyone loves IT here. Just raise of hands. Is anyone part of the IT shop for their cities or districts? All right, this is gonna be great. Okay, um, I'll just trash IT for you guys the whole time. All right. Um, So yeah, the focus of this is on ITGC fundamentals. If you've been to previous courses from the last 2 years, we had a session on just ITGC fundamentals, just giving an overview of ITGCs. Last year was a strong focus on SOC reports. And then this year is user access review. And kind of the theme that we're kind of seeing with the cities that we've audited their IT departments is sort of there's two really big controls um, that we're kind of seeing gaps in. One is the SOC review, which is essential, especially as companies go more cloud-based, more SaaS applications are being used in their departments. So the SOC review becomes essential. And this has always been essential, is the user access review. Um, it is the final line of defense in majority of IT departments, in all the IT departments. It's really is the final line of defense in engaging like the appropriateness of access. Kind of things we'll be covering. First off, how was everyone's July 4th? Was it great? Did everyone had a good time? Right? You ready to jump back in here? I literally cooked like 30 pounds of steak for family yesterday, so it was great. Like, yeah, so I probably still smell like smoked meats. Yeah, so what we'll cover today is we'll cover the basics, an overview of user access review, why they matter, kind of given just a high level understanding what ITGCs are, just so we can refresh everyone's memory. Then we'll kind of get into the user access review process flow, talk about some real world examples, and actually talk about some of the impacts of a weak control environment where we can point to not having user access reviews, probably one of the culprits there. Then we'll talk about kind of the triggers of like onboarding and offboarding and what could go wrong and why you want the user access review from those processes. Then we'll kind of talk about the roles, who's involved, timing, frequency. We'll talk about those are the core elements. We'll talk about other core elements, and then we'll walk through some just a weak example, a strong example, and then what to watch out for in terms of when you're actually performing the user access review. We're going to give you a quick checklist, and I think probably the most important thing, the risk mitigation through user access reviews. We're going to talk about that. And I think we're gonna, we'll talk about best practices, common audit deficiencies we see with the user access review. And then the one thing I do want to touch upon before we leave is sort of how to stand up that control and kind of the steps needed, maybe the baby steps that are needed to kind of get that control up and running. Because just looking at that, it could seem like a lot to get it going, but there's baby steps we can do to kind of get that going. First, who am I? Yeah, my name's Omar Rahman. I'm a CPA CISA. Been doing this too long. Started off in the Big Four doing IT, Sarbanes-Oxley, and kind of touched everything. Actually, even before that, I actually touched FSA, the financial statement audit, and business process SOX, and then rolled on to IT SOX. So I've kind of been doing this for a long time. Um, yeah, and I'm with ROM Advisory, and we've been helping out Badawi for about the last 3 to 4 years. We've been helping them out on their IT audit component of their financial statement audit. So you probably hear us, or you hear Hunter. Probably you hear Hunter sometimes. He's kind of my co-lead on these engagements as well. I'm always available if you just need to reach out. Of course, you could always reach out through Badawi and Associates to get a hold of us as well. All right. Just a quick overview, right? The purpose of a user access review is ensure only have users are appropriate in their current role, right? That's kind of the point of it. What's reviewed? Active users, roles, permissions, termination status. So yeah, the difference between an active user and an active employee is very important in user access review, right? You can have an active user, but someone who's technically terminated from whatever entity, city, district, right? Performed by control owners. Typically, these are going to be department leads, and it's typically going to be facilitated through IT. Sometimes you'll have IT involved in the review too. How often, right? The best practice is quarterly, minimum annually, and we'll kind of go into detail there. Why it matters. Again, we're kind of hitting to the heart of it, right? Think of this as the bluff statement, bottom line up front, right? This is why we need a user access, why it matters. Prevents unauthorized access, reduces fraud risk, and strengthens internal controls, right? And like I said, again, it is the last line of defense that you guys will have when it comes to logical access. Audit evidence expectations, we'll get into details there, we don't have to walk it through here. And then some of the common findings we'll see. And the most common one is terminated users are still active users in the system. And then users reviewing their own access. All right. So yeah, why user access reviews matter. Again, we kind of talked about it before. Prevents unauthorized access by identifying terminated users or inappropriate roles. It reduces fraud and error risk. And when we go through the real life examples, we'll talk about that. Supports audit readiness for financial audits, SOX, and general ITGC requirements, right? So the first control that's typically stood up in a SOX environment or in any environment is typically that user access review, because you need to do that user access review to level set, right? You kind of have to understand where you are currently to kind of stand up your control environment. Um, yeah. Real quickly, what are ITGCs? Just kind of a brief refresher here, right? There's three main components to ITGCs: logical access controls, change management controls, and IT operation controls. The user access review is under logical access controls, but they have a component on change management controls and IT operations controls, because you can have access to the tools in change management. You can have access to the tools used in operations, and those users need to be assessed as well. And that's kind of what the user access review will also review as well. So that's just kind of a brief understanding of what ITGCs are. There's a couple more. One things you're going to see more often with these ITGCs, you're going to start seeing cybersecurity controls coming into play. So you're going to kind of see you're going to see penetration testing kind of come into play, vulnerability scans come into play. So you're going to start seeing those come in. I know on the public company side, it's becoming more in the forefront. I can see other entities, state and local government, also taking that into play as well. I think you guys do work with CISA.gov. I think that government agency does a lot to work with a lot of state and local agencies and cities. So I think they're a great resource. All right, so the user access review, the process flow. For step one, right, this is kind of the basics. This is what we see normally in every user access review that we audit. Typically, step one is exporting the user list, right? And this is where IT is involved. They're going to be pulling the system access, the system report, complete user listing from the application. A key component, and this is kind of what we see when people do perform the user access review. Sometimes they don't really provide everything to the reviewer, right? They'll only provide a username and their status. No, you typically need to get the role, the permission, and other timestamps, maybe the last last login into that application as well. So you definitely want to add more data, the better. And definitely the more mature environments, they include roles and permissions. And we can kind of talk about that when we think about standing up your control environment, the user access review control. Step two is assign the right reviewers, right? So you don't want like your staff to review your managers, right? You want someone at the appropriate level and with the appropriate knowledge to review user access, right? And the reason why you want that is because you need someone to kind of call out segregation of duty risks, right? Those conflicts, right? So if someone has too much access, you want to be able to call that out. When you think about the fraud triangle, the kind of the biggest one, the one that I think entities have the most control over is access, the ability, right? And with the user access review, you have the ability to limit the the user's ability at the end of the day to do inappropriate activity by just limiting them at the highest level. It's the concepts is the principle of least privilege, right? No one should have the access. They should only have the access that they need at a minimum, right? They shouldn't go beyond that. And this is a trend. This principle of least privilege, it used to not be that way. So I don't know how many of you guys have worked on AS400 systems. AS400 systems are these old IBM. They have their legacy comes from mainframes, right? They were white books. There were white lists, right? And everyone had access to everything unless you explicitly tell them they don't have access to this. That's changed, right? With the principle of least privilege, more modern ERPs, think of your NetSuites, um, they now, the default is blacklist. You have access to nothing unless you explicitly say you have access to it. Now, one of the risks that you run into, and this kind of goes into onboarding, and we'll get to that step too. There's still a risk of giving people too much access just because of some of the way how some people are onboarded into the corporate environment, into the application. Step three, review the access, right? Reviewer evaluates whether each user's access is still appropriate based on job duties. That's where more data on the user list, the better, right? And then identify terminations, role changes, unnecessary access. Again, goes back to step two. Step two is essential. You need the right person to review in order to do step three. Step four, you request the changes, right? And this is where you identify the change that's needed. First, you need to identify if that access is inappropriate or just it's a timing. Like, yeah, it's time. Like they don't need that access anymore, but it's not inappropriate necessarily. You need to request a change. Now, when we talk about risk mitigation, we'll be in the next slide. Step four is important, especially if that access was inappropriate, right? That their access was inappropriate, then you need to do risk mitigation procedures. Step five, confirm changes were made. And this is kind of a key part of more mature environments. They kind of do this next step in step five. They just don't stop at the review. They document changes were made, right? So they go in and they like, okay, we're tracking all the change tickets, the request tickets for these users that like we've identified. And then the next step above that is, hey, they get a new list, a new user list from IT, and then they kind of like, yep, those users are removed. It's sort of like the final check. And then step six, and this is one where we like to see more of, is the formal approval of the UAR. Typically, you package it all up, and then you kind of do a final sign off. The most common final sign off is an email. It's an email to the controller or someone above them, or even to themselves, and they just have an email chain because they're time stamped, goes through an Exchange server, it can be validated for changes, so it's good. Email approvals are perfectly fine. If you want to go a step above, you can go ahead and do digital signing as well through DocuSign or Adobe. The one thing you don't want to do is sign off on an Excel sheet because Excel sheets are highly manipulative. You can make changes to that and to a certain cell where you sign off. Some real world examples: terminated user still active. I think I already talked about this. We don't really have to go about that. Role mismatch, accounts payable clerk getting system admin rights. You definitely, want to control for that. And then, the UAR outcome would be the rights are downgraded, right, to match job title. Privilege access not revoked. You see this a lot, especially in development or in when you're doing a major change. You give temporary elevated access to certain users to kind of debug or get through hypercare in a post implementation of like a new system or a major upgrade. A lot of times that temporary access isn't removed, right? And user access review is going to catch that. It's more common than you think that this happens. All right, so these are some real world impacts in terms of people having too much access, and which is the one thing you can control in your environment, right? I'm sure you guys already know about this one, right? I didn't put the name, but probably everyone already knows it, right? 54 million over 22 years to fund horse breeding. Comptroller, the kind of the key issue when they were promoted to comptroller, they still retained access to treasury applications, right? So user access review could have caught that. Something more recent. It's a city. I'm actually I used to live in this city. I'm a neighbor of that city now. In Southern California, stole 5 million via wire transfers to support gambling investments. The preventative strategies that could have prevented this was again segregation of duties. How do you maintain segregation duties is through control environments, which is systemic centric oversight controls, right? So you can initially set up the segregation of duties, but things change. How do you track those changes, and how do you ensure that SOD conflicts are still, not there, right? And that's through controls, like a user access review. All right, kind of talking about the risks with onboarding, right? Typically, when people are onboarded, I think one of the most common things I see is I'll mimic their access, right? Mimic this person's access, right? Sometimes it's correct, sometimes it may be a little too much, right? And you won't really know until you do user access review, right? You can do some things up front with the access and kind of like having more defined roles when you onboard someone and provision someone access, not necessarily say mimic someone like their access, right? So that's something to think about. That's a risk that we see, right? Um, and I think less mature IT environments, they tend to over provision because they want to limit the back and forth with finance and accounting with the requests and stuff. Sometimes it could just be due to laziness. They just want to give them more access so they don't have to worry about it. To them, IT is the less tickets, the better, right? That's sort of like IT's motive, right? That they're doing something right if there's less request tickets. So keep that in mind. Offboarding, again, termination control, in terms of properly terminating somebody, it's probably the control that fails the most out of our testing. Like in public company, private company, state and local, Fed, fails by far. It always fails. There's always a drop in the termination control. So someone will have access to a system even when they're terminated, right? And then one thing to think about with kind of the digital transformation into SaaS applications, right? You don't need to be in a corporate network anymore. You can access an ERP just with a normal browser from home. You don't need a VPN, right? Like a classic example is NetSuite. NetSuite actually makes it hard to configure access through the corporate network. Now, there's some that are different. There's some that use other tools like Ping One or MFA to kind of like ensure like only the right people are accessing it. But at the end of the day, if they're terminated and they still have access and MFA is enabled, that's technically still not stopping them from accessing, right? So that's something a UAR will capture at the end of the day. Um, and that's sort of the big one for offboarding. Thinking through business and IT roles in the user access review. IT is the facilitator. IT is the one that's probably going to kick off the process. Think of them as the project manager for this, right? They're the ones that are going to kick it off. They're the ones that are going to pull the user list. They're the ones that are going to ensure that it's complete and accurate. And then they're going to hand it off to you or well, who else in accounting and finance to review the roles and the users. Probably the only users you probably can't review are the IT roles. So you may have to check and see how you're going to review that. Sometimes it could just be someone in IT, but I know in a lot of cities the IT shops are pretty small, right? We're talking maybe a couple people. So probably someone still in finance needs to review them for appropriateness. Like, yep, they are IT, there are admins, we agree, right? You still need that sign off. The one thing you can't do is you can't have people self review and approve. So outside of the legal limit, like the not the legal limit, but like the limit of like responsibility and accountability. The CIO, who's going to review the CIO's access, right? Like it's going to be, is going to be the city manager. You're probably not going to get the city manager involved. So there are reasonable limits to like that rule, but for the most part, you don't self-review and you don't self-approve. That's the general rule. Um, and then they're also IT is also responsible for changes. So anything you've identified, they're responsible for change and they're responsible to document. Business responsibilities, while small, like not as um, task heavy, is probably essential, right? They're the most important person, right? They're not pulling the report, they're not ensuring completeness and accurate, they're reviewing the people. But that means that they're responsible for ensuring that they're appropriate, SOD conflicts are not there, and they're responsible for ensuring the final sign off on the package at the end of the day. So that's really business role at the end of the day. So you want to assign your IT person, you want to assign your business person who's going to be doing the bulk of the review. And if you have a large population, you probably need to split out the reviews. If you have a large population of users, you need to probably split it out to the department heads, something like that. All right. This is just another slice of it. I don't know if we really need to get into it. Who's involved in the user access review? So the one thing I actually didn't talk about, which is actually important because this is how you determine terminations, HR reports. So reaching out to your HR department and getting the user list from HR as well. Because how are you going to determine if a user is terminated or not? If you're a small enough shop, right? If you're a small enough group, you probably already know. But for larger departments, for larger teams, you probably need to get that HR report. And you need to ensure and you need to tie back the user list to the HR report. And then, of course, who's involved? External auditors. We're asking for the package and we're constantly badgering you guys. Okay. Timing and frequency. So there's a best practice and there's the reasonable practice, right? Best practice is quarterly or monthly. Really, quarterly is what we see. And these are really for the core ERP application. We recommend quarterly. Now, even if it is the core ERP application, you could potentially lower the frequency based on some quantitative metrics, maybe some qualitative as well. Probably the biggest metric for this one is just the volume of users. How large is that user base? Or if it's you can count on it with one hand, you probably don't need to review it that often. And also, if the volume of changes in that system of user changes is low, like 1 to 2 new users a year or 1 to 2 chain deltas a year means added or removed, right? If it's not a lot, then hey, okay, you could lower it, maybe semi-annually or even annually. So it's something that as management you'll have to determine the frequency, right? And then yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one. There's some other factors as well, like complexity of the system, how many roles are there? Are they all custom? Those are some other factors, but I guess, first test would be just user changes and your user base. Okay. Core elements. I think this is probably just a deck. I think you guys have these slides. Just if you guys want to focus on it, I think that's fine. I think at the end of the class, we'll kind of come back to this and kind of talk about like what's absolutely needed as you're standing up your control at the end of the day. See if we're on time. I'm kind of speeding through this, aren't I? All right. This is a weak example of a user access review. No review name, no reviewer name. Actually, there is a reviewer name on there. Okay, that's my bad. But yeah, John Smith reviewed it. And then the review date. But technically, it's an Excel file. It's an Excel field. I don't know who wrote that on that field. As an auditor, that cell John Smith reviewed and approved UAR. I have no idea who reviewed that because that is anyone can write that. So I don't know who did that, right? Um, there's really nothing else here. Like, how do you know these users are appropriate? I don't have their roles. I don't have their permissions in here. Um, I don't know. I don't even know if this is the full report. How would I know there's 10 users here? So this goes back to what did IT provide me? How did I get comfort that I have a full list at the end of the day, right? So this is something that would never really get accepted. It'd be a deficiency on our end, right? So just watch out for missing timestamps on user lists, self-reviewed access. Let's go back. Let's see if John Smith, did he review himself? Well, I don't even know if John Smith reviewed it, but clearly he didn't, but just some things to look out for. Self-reviewed access, blanket approvals. And this kind of goes back to, and I know this is like, you guys would probably complain about this about auditors. We're looking for the individual line item review, right? Did we see you guys review each line item, right? That's something we'd expect to see on our end. Um, no evidence of follow-up changes, right? If there's anything inappropriate. And then reviews performed by IT instead of business. We do see this sometimes where IT just reviews and approves and yep, says everyone's okay. And they have no idea what's going on in the business side. They have no idea what's going on in finance and accounting. So that's something to also think about as well. Ensure that your involvement, on the finance accounting side, you guys are there involved. A stronger UAR example, right? So the thing you should look for from IT is a screenshot of them generating the report. Better yet, be there and observe the report being generated with them, right? And get it from them. Like what I see, especially when you're starting off standing up to control, we'll do working sessions. So, and this is more on my consulting side. We'll have working sessions, we'll have office hours, and we'll bring in both IT and business process, and we'll just work the user access review, and we'll spend like an hour and a half or 2 hours to just let's go ahead and complete the user access review, guys. Go ahead and stand up the report. Take the screenshot here. All right, generate the report. Here's the report. All right, business, put it in your template. Let's go ahead and do the review. So you can do this. You can knock this out in a meeting or two if you want to, rather than just waiting for them to hand off things and maybe things take weeks where things can take hours if you just do it through the meeting. So that's something you can think about as well. And you can kind of see we have more details on the role. We have a line by line, was access appropriate? And why we can trust it is because there's an email attachment. There's an email that attaches this user access review that's given by whoever the reviewer is, John Smith. Now is a real person, right? Um, and he went ahead and he reviewed everyone's access. He attaches the file and he gives his formal sign off via an email, basically. Okay. Here's a quick checklist just for your guys's. You guys can keep it and just have it handy when you guys perform the user access review. Yeah. Say that again. Yeah. Yeah, business. Yeah, the finance director, the business person. Yeah, he could review it. So IT is facilitating, business is reviewing. So IT is pulling the report, they're generating the listing, they're providing the listing. Business, finance, accounting, they're performing the review. Yeah. So you may have IT review some IT users, but you shouldn't expect IT to review finance accounting people because they just don't know the responsibilities on the ground to their roles, right? But does that make sense? Yeah, okay. All right. I will say, just as it relates to the financial statement audit, this is the focus is finance and accounting, right? You're not really going to focus on other departments at the end of the day because the applications you're focusing on are finance and accounting applications at the end of the day. So yeah, we try to scope out what needs. We don't try to boil the ocean with our audits. That's not something we try to do. All right. So this is kind of a key component here, risk mitigation through a UAR. So what happens in your user access review when you identify a user terminated, not terminated, but they clearly have inappropriate access and they've had inappropriate access for a while, right? What are the procedures you need to do, right? And this is something that I'd say last 5 years has been more stressed by the external audit community, by the PCOB specifically, but this you guys are not. Yeah, PCOB has no purview over state and local, but I can say within peer review and within the external audit community, the risk assessment is essential. So when you find that inappropriate user, you need to know if they did anything inappropriate transaction-wise during that time. So how do you do that? Right. So this is something where you'd probably have to work with IT and you kind of have to see like, okay, say they were a terminated user. Let's give an example of a terminated user and they still had access for like the last 3 months from after they terminated. So from after they terminated to when you identified that they still had access was 3 months. How do you get comfort that they didn't do anything wrong during that 3 month period? So I guess someone want to answer that. What do you think you would want to look at first? We generate report that in that period, was there any transaction performed by that user which was terminated? I would think that's good. Maybe somebody else. Yeah, that's good, but I would do something before that. What would I do?
Identify the root cause of exactly why the slip up happened. Maybe there was turnover, maybe there was something else, maybe there was a system update and something got missed, but ideally you want to identify why there was that mistermination in the first place.
I'd say that's part of the deficiency analysis, right? But this is just this is exposure analysis time. What else would I look at? Like what you're saying is correct. I would look at transactions, but I would look at something first before that. There you go. Did they even log on? Right. So that's typically a timestamp. That's something you can easily find and typically available. So first things first, like don't boil the ocean first. Don't look at every transaction don't look at their transaction history. See if they even logged on first. So I would do that first, right? If they logged on, then I'd have to go in and look at transactions at that point, and that can get time intensive. Yeah. And then you'd want to document it, of course, this exposure analysis. Um, and then, yeah, and then you look at the root cause and kind of see what to fix from the controls perspective from then on. Typically, an onboarding or typically more often offboarding problem, right at the end of the day. Just to kind of talk about root cause with terminations and appropriate access, typically there's a disconnect between HR and finance accounting and IT. There's always, and it starts at HR somewhere in the process in HR communicating the termination, it just there's either something drops in that communication to where finance accounting doesn't take action to remove, or IT just drops the ball. But it always starts with HR. So you want to shore up that process with that HR communication, just from my experience. Alrighty. And then just honestly, this is something we've already talked through. I don't know if we really need to walk through each one. Evidence of control operation, right? This is sort of how it impacts your audit. Shows access are being periodically reviewed. Gives comfort that you guys know your own systems and environments by doing this, right? Um, and again, I do have to stress this. I don't know how many audits have been saved with a good user access review. Control environments fail. Onboarding failed. Offboarding failed. Admin access failed. I don't know how many times user access review has saved audits, at least IT audits, right? And what it means for the financial statement audit side is that, if you're able to at least point to this user access review control being in place, that lowers their assessment of risk of materiality, a misstatement, right? That lowers that risk. So their controls, their procedures, they get to control a little bit more on their procedures. They don't have to go full high risk, right? So that's something to think about there. It's that last line, and it really saves audits at the end of the day. Again, common audit deficiencies, I think we've already gone through this. I don't need to go through it again, but you guys have it on your slide deck. Best practices again. Um, again, I think we've already talked about it, but I think it's something you can definitely keep with you on hand when you guys do perform a user access review. We could have questions right now, but I did want to talk about what you can do when you're standing up a control environment for the first time, because I've done this a couple times on the consulting side. Um, you want to go baby steps. So you want to also have you want to have like a champion. You want to have a leader that's kind of running the first user access review. So centralized versus decentralized. So do you have many reviewers kind of on each application, or do you just have one central reviewer that works with other teams, other departments to get the reviews done? A main facilitator, basically, right? Your year zero, you probably want one facilitator that also acts as a trainer. Okay. And then the focus would be on pulling user lists properly, pulling user lists and getting the right completeness and accuracy, the screenshots, getting the right IPE, right? So that's information provided by entity, but it's basically the screenshots you provide when generating a report. You want to get that correct, right? Because if that's wrong, the review, doesn't matter how good it is, it will fail the control, right? When you actually do the review, I would recommend keep it simple. Look at just roles. Don't look at permissions. Permissions are later. Focus on roles, focus on big items, right? And then complete the process timely. Complete the process timely is what I'd recommend. Um, for state and local, it's really um, you guys don't really have quarterly filings, right? You guys just have your annual return at the end of the day. So you just got to make sure it's done before then. But I would say keep a strict project plan, keep a strict deadline, and maintain that. Typically, if you did a quarterly control, I'd say complete the review a month after the quarter. That's when it's due. That's when you need to complete the work, basically. And then, yeah, everything from there, sign off, emails, that's fine. But I would say keep it simple with the review itself. Focus on roles first, and then focus on generating the report. I don't even do risk mitigation yet. Just focus on changes. Get a good baseline. And I'd say your second user access review, add the risk mitigation controls, the risk assessment control, the risk assessment step where you do the look back. So that's something I would recommend. Just starting it up. We're at 11:52. We're a little early here, right? Yeah. Any questions, guys? Maybe get an early lunch, get an early jump to lunch, guys. Once, twice, thrice.
I guess that's a unique problem to have. We always ran over, so this is the first year that we're actually ahead. But don't worry, I'll fix that during my presentation. I have a lot of materials, so we'll probably need that. I do not want to start my presentation early, just to be mindful of the participants on Zoom, in case they were planning on coming back at 1:15 for the GASB presentation. So if no other questions, I mean, I think lunch is ready. However, if there are questions about previous presentations, happy to entertain those as well. Our lunch is not scheduled to start until 12:15, so we have 20 minutes for questions. But if not, we can definitely break for lunch.
Yeah.
How would we identify about the listing we received is completed and accurate?
So this is where you
And,
need.
and Omar, if you don't mind, maybe repeating the question,
Yeah.
just because of the,
Yeah, I'll try to repeat it, and Jen, you tell me if I said it correctly. So I think it's when you get the user listing, how do you get comfort that it's complete and accurate? So this is where you have to make sure IT provides generation screenshots for you, or better yet, observe the generation of the report, right? So if this is your first time doing it, right, if this is your first user access review, I would recommend observing the generation of the user list. So have a meeting with IT, see the generation of the report, see how it looks like, and then tell IT, I expect these screenshots to show me that you generate this report. And normally what happens is that these user lists on screen in the application will show you a row count, total users, 173. And then you'll get a list of users, right? You'll get like an initial listing of users. You could have them scroll up, down, right? So you could have them go from the top all the way to the bottom, and you get the final row count as well. So what you can do is after you get those screenshots, you get the report from them in an email. You check your Excel file, you check the total row count. Oh, it's 173, like it says on the report. Great, 100. That takes care of completeness. All right, let me take care of accuracy then. Let me take a line item. Let me take 2 line items, 3 line items. Typically, it's only one. Take a line item from there. Okay, does it tie back to what I saw on the screen? So that's something you can do. Yeah, no problem.
You external websites from sales taxes, bank, brokers, or other websites.
So are you talking about other like applications that, sorry, can you repeat that question? It's kind of hard for me to hear. You want to give them the microphone?
Yeah.
Maybe? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, my question is about, is there a need to review external websites that the financial users access, like CalPERS Bank, ICMA, and all other sites?
Yeah, if you're doing your just disbursements activity through the bank, right? You're doing transfers, you're doing ACHs through there. Credit card payments, so those are typically covered through PCI, and those are typically um, not in scope, like the credit card payment processors, right? Now, I think there's some banks have admin portals to where you can actually control like where those like where the credit card payments are initially deposited, right? Account numbers potentially, like the bank accounts, right? So if they have access to that, you may want to consider doing user access reviews over that. If they have if it has that ability. But if it's like only read-only access and only you see in that portal is only read-only, you have no ability to make changes, right? All you see are just transactions going through. You can't make any changes to them. It's read-only. But you need to confirm that, right? So I think the litmus test would be what ability do you have to modify data, right? So if that external application, that banking website, you have the ability to make material changes like, hey, I could actually change the bank account information, right? I'd probably want to know who has the ability to do that, right? But if it's only read-only access and that's the only thing they can get, if they're only restricted to read only, so this is the big thing, this is the what could go wrong, right? If they have the if everyone has read only, but they have the ability to change that to do more than just read only, I'd want to review that. But if the vendor enforces read only, that means doesn't matter who has access to it. They only have read only. Only the vendor can make changes. And if you want to make a change, you have to like send a form to the bank. Then I think that's really and it's still only read only at the end of the day. Like say you want to make an account number change, you could only do it through the bank. I'd probably have manual business controls in place, but access to the application, you can't make that change. So why do I need to review it, right? Because everyone's read only. So yeah, that'd probably be the main litmus test. Okay.
Any other questions? I'll give you the mic.
Password sharing. Password sharing. Typically, I test that under admins, but you don't want to share passwords, guys, ever. You don't want generic accounts, and then you don't want to share passwords.
Yeah,
That is
like
absolutely
if we remove
no.
somebody's access, but he or she they got someone else's password who have access, then that's
That is a
crime.
that is an on the top a tone at the top problem, and that is a tone at the top problem if the leadership management allows that to happen, right? That there should be strong tone on the top to not let that happen, right? And then that would be tested in the password control at the end of the day. So yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, hi, Omar. I think I have a question regarding because lacking of review of users' access is a deficiency, but I remember sometimes in the past, sometimes you might consider not a significant deficiency. You will just say the likelihood of causing a risk is immaterial. So actually, because lacking of user access review is a situation, how did you evaluate that will cause significant
A
risk?
lot of times you look at the manual. So, okay, there's a general process when you're identifying a deficiency, right? So when you identify a deficiency, you kind of have to then see if there's any compensating controls. So the first compensating controls you start at are on the IT side, right? User access review is the final control on the IT side. After that, it's then business process controls. How comfort do you have with, hey, like typically, yes, you could have all the wrong access in the world in a system, but is someone on the back end, do they have a strong review control at the end of the day, right? A journal entry review control, right? If there's a journal entry review control, that's typically a pretty strong control, right? Because you can kind of see the transactions from there. Another one more on the retail side is cash proofing, right? So if you have someone that does retail and then, they're tying it to cash at the end of the day for your revenue, okay, like that's a pretty strong control because at the end of the day, the real risk is risk of material misstatement, right? We're not really looking at operational fraud or, that concern. It's really, are the numbers correct at the end of the day? And that's how you get to it at the end of the day. Um, Part of me wants to make some SD all the time, but I have to do that analysis. The IT auditor in me wants to call it an SD or an MW, but I have to bring it back to the financial statement audit. And what does it really mean to the financial statement audit at the end of the day?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So do you have some recommended practices for, as part of the review, what types of trainings the users get for things like, identifying phishing attacks, those types of things? Is that part of the review process, or are there some?
No, this is purely about users' role, what the user does on the ground to the role they have in the system. So that's really what it is. And if the user's not even there, are they still having access? Phishing training and cybersecurity awareness, basically, that would be a separate control, in my opinion. It'd be a training control where you ensure you do annual or, whatever frequency training you do. Use KnowBe4 for your phishing exercises, stuff like that. I would call that a separate control from the user access review.
Still have a few minutes.
Any other IT audit topics you want to talk about? This was originally going to be AI, like just finance and AI. I will say this, my experience so far, auditing AI within financial reporting is not substantial right now. Like there's not a lot they've tried, but they've kind of scaled back. Like OneStream, which is a financial consolidation, or Kiva, which is another financial consolidation tool. A lot of the companies, they try to do it, but at the end of the day, they're still going in and they're manually reconning, they're manually consolidating at the end of the day. I don't think it's there. And I've been in on some ethical AI auditing trainings. Right now, how AI is being audited right now, it's almost like you're doing sample testing. Like you're looking at their mental model, the AI mental model, and you're looking at the ethical models. And then, yes, depending on the situation, it can go A and B. It's supposed to go A all the time, but how do you evaluate that without looking at a statistical sample? So it's almost like you're doing manual testing almost.
AI, I joke around and say AI is becoming the new gluten-free, where if you want to sell, the same like where they sell you all these things at the store and it's all gluten-free and you don't really know if it's really gluten-free or not, or if even if it's gluten-free, it's good for you or not. You don't even know that. But I feel like AI is the same thing where everyone is just slapping AI on whatever they're selling. And when you really look at it in detail, I mean, it's just not really AI, it's just some automation. For me, AI in auditing would be that I would run a situation through the AI and say, okay, we have this setup in AP, and I expect AI to tell me out of 100,000 audits that were done with this situation, that was the outcome. That was the result. Fraud happened in that many of those situations. So it's just giving me access to that data, which I don't think it's available now. I think what's available
it's
now.
not available now. I've been working with an AI company. They're trying to partner with us on like kind of developing best practice for their AI model. The problem they're running into, they don't have the data.
Yep.
No one wants to share the data.
Yep.
Big Four doesn't want to share the data. None of the internal audit shops want to send the data over to them. So they're going off of qualitative, limited data sets. And that just doesn't give them the right answer. Like,
And AI is all about data, right?
yeah.
That's what they're spending all the money on, is acquiring data. So I don't really believe that is out there. I mean, we do use software and applications, and they say they are AI powered, but when you really look at them, they're not what I would call AI powered. They have some nice features, but I feel like it's mostly data mining.
Quality of life features. I think they have
Yeah,
quality of life features.
definitely.
Like, hey, condense this web page into a document, right? A PowerPoint presentation or something.
Summarize,
Yeah, exactly.
those 100 comments back and forth, and and these things are very helpful, but they're still not what I would call true AI.
Financial reporting purposes, where you need to trust the data, it doesn't do the job right now. And this is one of the reason why we came back to user access review and why we wanted to do this presentation is because I'll be honest, the cities I've audited, I've maybe seen 2 have a user access review. A good one, a decent one. The other ones are informal, they just haven't done it. Sorry, they just haven't done it. So this is why, and it's essential. This is like a fundamental control.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did hear about Workiva, and it seems like we looked at it a little bit, and it seems helpful from a client perspective because it updates the MD&A for you as numbers change. It updates the percentages, but that's pretty much it. I don't think it helps us as auditors as far as updating the notes and all of that. So still, the financial reports are, for the most part, still a manual process. Maybe it's helping on the MD&A side, but not on the audit side, not on the from a preparer perspective. But it's definitely something that it's worth looking at. I know Berkeley uses maybe something similar, but Workiva is, that's what's being marketed right now. So, all right. I think it's 12:07, so we're only 7 minutes ahead of time. So you can just take your time eating, or you can maybe take a second round. Hopefully the food will be good to be able to do that. But we'll come back at 1:15. We'll start our GASB update at 1:15. But otherwise, lunch is ready. So please help yourself. Thank you.